7 figures, sold.
This piece has a remarkable depth. I agree, the brushwork is masterful.
It speaks to the human condition.
The applause was polite.
7 figures,
measured,
sold.
controlled, expensive. Crystal glasses hovered midair. A violinist in the corner adjusted her bow. Investors nodded with thin smiles, whispering numbers that most people would never earn in a lifetime. The Korean CEO had just purchased the centerpiece of the exhibition. 7 figures, one signature, one decisive nod. He stood tall in a dark tailored suit, posture straight, expression unreadable. Platinum blonde hair brushed back neatly. The intricate black ink curling up his neck disappeared beneath his collar, a quiet contrast to the refinement of the room. He did not smile. He rarely did. Beside him stood his father. Older, softer in posture, but not in presence. His gray suit was understated, almost modest compared to the wealth surrounding them. His hands were folded calmly in front of him. Watching, always watching. The gallery lights cast a warm glow over polished wooden floors and white walls lined with curated prestige. The painting he had just purchased hung beneath a spotlight. Bold strokes, layered textures, something abstract and loud enough to demand interpretation. Cameras flashed. The curator beamed. "A visionary acquisition," she said, voice bright with gratitude. "This piece represents power, legacy, and you didn't buy the painting." The sentence was calm, not loud, but it cut cleanly through the applause. The violin stopped. The curator froze mid-breath. Every head turned. The CEO did not. Not immediately. "You bought the signature." Now he turned. She stood only a few feet away. Brown coat draped cleanly over her shoulders. Hair braided neatly back from her face. No diamonds. No visible wealth. Just composure. Her eyes didn't waver. The room waited for her to look intimidated. She didn't. The CEO studied her the way he studied contracts, assessing risk, calculating damage, deciding whether to crush or ignore. The curator forced a brittle laugh. "I'm sure what she means is, I mean," the woman continued, voice steady, "that you paid for reputation, not for story." Silence expanded, the kind that makes people uncomfortable. The CEO's jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Not yet. Curiosity. "And what," he asked evenly, "would you say the story is?" Somewhere behind him, a board member shifted his weight. The father said nothing. The woman stepped closer to the painting, not to him. She studied it the way someone studies something personal. "It's about displacement," she said. "About being admired in rooms you don't belong in. About being owned by the highest bidder." Her gaze flicked briefly to him. "And surviving it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The CEO glanced at the plaque beneath the painting. The artist's name, the awards, the accolades, the auction history. He knew numbers. He knew leverage. He did not like being spoken to like this in public. Especially not tonight. Especially not in front of his father. "You're assuming a lot," he replied, tone cool, controlled. "I'm observing," she said. A camera flashed again, but this time the lens wasn't pointed at the painting. It was pointed at them. Tension sharpened the air. Investors exchanged cautious looks. This wasn't the polished narrative they expected from a Valentine's Day charity event featuring one of Asia's most powerful CEOs and his father. The father finally moved. Slowly. Not toward his son. Toward her. That subtle shift changed the temperature of the room. He stepped forward, hands still loosely folded, studying the painting with genuine interest. "What would you have paid for it?" he asked her quietly. The question landed heavier than any accusation. The CEO felt it. His father wasn't dismissing her. He was engaging her. She hesitated only a fraction of a second. Nothing. A few gasps. The curator stiffened. The CEO's eyes narrowed. "And why not?" The father pressed gently. "Because art about survival shouldn't be owned," she replied. "It should be understood." The father's expression shifted. Not amusement. Not offense. Recognition. The CEO saw it. That flicker. That approval he had spent years earning in boardrooms and quarterly reports. And she had just earned it with a sentence. The room waited for him to respond. To reassert control. To remind everyone exactly who had just written the check. Instead, he looked back at the painting. For the first time since buying it. Not at the signature. At the brushstrokes. Thick. Restless. Almost defiant. He felt something unfamiliar. Not humiliation. Not anger. Something closer to being seen. He turned back to her. You think I don't understand it, he said. I think, she answered carefully, you didn't have to. The words hung between them. Sharp, honest, dangerous. His father studied his son now, not as a chairman studies a successor, as a man studies a choice. The applause that had filled the room minutes ago felt distant. Hollow. The CEO stepped closer to the painting, reducing the space between himself and her. Not aggressively, deliberately. Tell me, he said quietly, what you think I missed. The curator opened her mouth to intervene, then closed it. The room leaned in, and somewhere beneath the controlled exterior of a man who commanded billions, something subtle shifted. Because this wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a business play. It wasn't strategy. It was challenge. And his father, the man who had shaped his entire life around legacy, obedience, and power, was watching with something dangerously close to interest. The woman met his gaze again, unimpressed, unafraid. You missed the cost, she said softly. Not the money. The cost. A beat passed. His father exhaled slowly. And in that quiet, charged space between power and truth, between ownership and understanding, between reputation and reality, the CEO realized this moment would not disappear quietly. It would follow him. And that was the moment everything he thought he controlled began to shift. The gallery lights still glowed behind his eyes long after the applause faded. But long before art, long before Valentine's Day, long before a woman with steady eyes questioned him in public, there was structure, there was training, there was legacy. He was not raised to hesitate. He was raised to inherit. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Hanseong Global never echoed. It absorbed sound the way it absorbed weakness. Thick glass walls overlooked the river cutting through Seoul's financial district. The skyline glittered like something engineered rather than lived in. He stood at the head of the table. No notes. No slides. Numbers lived in his head. Q3 projections are conservative, he said evenly. We expand manufacturing in Singapore by 8%. We divest from the subsidiary in Osaka. And we close the Shanghai acquisition before our competitors realize we've already secured regulatory approval. Silence. Executives twice his age watched carefully. No one interrupted. They had learned not to. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He concluded. If there are objections, he added calmly, state them now. There never were. Across the table sat his father. Chairman. Founder. Architect of everything. The older man never praised him in the room. Praise was inefficient. Instead, he observed. Watched for cracks. Looked for hesitation in tone, in posture, in breath. There was none. After meetings, when the room cleared, the father would offer small adjustments. Pause longer before answering. Never lean back first. Control the room before they realize you have. Lessons delivered without warmth, but not without intention. The CEO absorbed them the way he absorbed market data. Precision was survival. He did not date. He did not drink publicly beyond what optics required. He did not gamble. He did not post. His personal life existed only in carefully managed columns inside business magazines. Eligible, strategic, disciplined. There were rumors, of course. There always are around power. But nothing confirmed. Nothing soft. His calendar was an architecture of control. Every minute accounted for. Every public appearance curated. Including tonight. Valentine's Day. The gallery had not been chosen for romance. It had been chosen for narrative. A softer image for the heir apparent. Cultural patron. Refined leadership. A contrast to his ruthless acquisition streak over the past 18 months. Art was optics. Emotion packaged respectably. He had agreed without question. Because that was what sons built for legacy did. Weeks earlier, in the quiet of his father's private office, the unspoken had finally been spoken. The Kim family has finalized their interest, his father said, pouring tea with steady hands. The CEO remained standing. A merger, but not the corporate kind. The Kim conglomerate's daughter. Western educated. Polished. Compatible. This is not about affection, the father said evenly. It is about alignment. He did not argue. He did not ask for time. He nodded once. Alignment. Legacy. Expansion. Marriage reduced to strategic stability. He had watched his father build an empire from scarcity. Watched him transform a mid-sized logistics firm into an international powerhouse through discipline and sacrifice. Emotion had never been part of the equation. Why should it be now? The night of the gallery, Before stepping out of the car, his father adjusted his cufflinks. "You've been decisive lately," the older man said quietly. "Investors appreciate clarity." "I don't leave room for doubt," the CEO replied. A faint pause. "Clarity," his father repeated, "must sometimes be softened." The CEO did not respond. He did not need to. Softness was not a language he had been taught to speak fluently. They entered the gallery together. Cameras flashed immediately. Curators greeted them with reverence. A line of patrons subtly shifted to create a path forward. This was not merely attendance. It was presence. And presence, in their world, was currency. The painting he eventually purchased had been pre-selected by advisors. Strong artist. Rising value. Global appeal. Good press. He listened as the curator spoke about narrative, resilience, post-colonial identity. He nodded at appropriate moments. Then he raised the bid. Clean. Decisive. Applause followed. Exactly as expected. His father stood beside him, silent. Assessing. And then, she spoke. Even now, replaying the moment in his mind, he recognized the fracture. "You didn't buy the painting. You bought the signature." He had faced hostile takeovers, public accusations, boardroom betrayals. But something about the way she said it unsettled him more than open aggression ever could. Because she did not sound resentful. She sounded certain. And certainty is difficult to dismantle. Back in the present, standing in the gallery with murmurs rising around them, he felt something unfamiliar pressing at the edges of his control. Not fear. Exposure. His father's attention had shifted. Not toward damage control. Toward her. He remembered being 14, presenting his first business proposal at the family dining table. He had outlined expansion into overseas shipping routes with meticulous research. His father had listened without expression, then asked one question. Why? He had fumbled. Because he had memorized data, but not conviction. Tonight felt similar. When she asked what he saw in the painting, he gave a measured answer about investment value, global resonance, cultural positioning. It sounded hollow even to him. Because she wasn't asking about value. She was asking about meaning. Meaning was inefficient. Meaning did not scale. Meaning complicated legacy. He was not built to prioritize it. In the gallery, investors whispered. Phones discreetly recorded. This was no longer a routine appearance. It was becoming a narrative. And narratives, once loose, were difficult to contain. He glanced at his father briefly. The older man's expression was not disapproval. It was curiosity. That unsettled him more. Because curiosity meant reconsideration. Reconsideration meant unpredictability. And unpredictability threatened the clean structure of his life. Weeks earlier, during a private dinner with the Kim family, the merger's human element had been presented. The daughter smiled politely across the table. Intelligent, educated, elegant, compatible. They discussed philanthropic initiatives, overseas expansion, art investments. It had felt like negotiating a joint venture. There was no discomfort, no spark, just symmetry. After dinner, his father had said, "You will not regret this." He had believed him. Regret was a luxury for people without responsibility. In the gallery now, under the scrutiny of cameras and whispers, he realized something unsettling. Tonight had not been about art. It had been about image. About reassuring shareholders that the future chairman was cultured, balanced, stable. What he did not know, what he had not been informed of, was that members of the press had been quietly invited. Strategically, discreetly, to capture the optics of father and son on Valentine's Day. Humanized power. He only noticed the extra lenses when one flash lingered too long. He scanned the perimeter. 2 media representatives he recognized from financial networks. Not art publications. Financial. He turned slowly toward his father. The older man did not meet his eyes immediately. That alone told him everything. This was deliberate. Another layer of planning. Another adjustment to the narrative. Control layered upon control. He felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger. Constraint. And then, the middle of this calculated atmosphere. She refused to be impressed. Not by his name. Not by his wealth. Not by the press. Not by his father's presence. The room still hovered in suspended tension as cameras waited for resolution. He understood something in that moment. This was not a boardroom he could dominate. Not with numbers. Not with silence. Not with legacy. Because she was not negotiating. She was observing. And that made her dangerous in a way acquisitions never were. He had been trained to conquer resistance. He had never been trained to understand it. His father finally spoke again, asking her questions instead of silencing her. That, more than her words, marked the shift. Because if the architect of his discipline was willing to listen, then perhaps the structure he lived inside was not as immovable as he believed. The gallery air felt thinner now, more fragile. The applause had faded completely, and beneath the controlled exterior of a man built entirely for inheritance, something small but undeniable stirred. A question, not about value, not about optics, but about choice. He had been decisive his entire life. He had never chosen freely. Cameras continued to flash. Investors watched. His father observed. And the woman in the brown coat stood unshaken, her eyes steady, unimpressed by everything he represented. For the first time, control did not feel absolute. It felt rehearsed. And somewhere between the painting, the press he hadn't authorized, the merger he hadn't resisted, and the woman who refused to lower her gaze, a crack formed. Small, but real. And then she refused to be impressed. The silence in the gallery did not break. It stretched. Curators shifted nervously. Investors pretended to study nearby canvases. The violinist lowered her instrument completely. The CEO held her gaze. She did not look away. It was the curator who finally intervened, her voice tight with forced composure. "Of course," she said quickly. "We're honored to have the consulting historian for this exhibition with us tonight." She worked closely with the artist on contextual framing. A beat. The room adjusted its understanding. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't a protester. She belonged here. The CEO's eyes flicked back to her, recalculating. "Consulting historian?" his father asked mildly. She nodded once. "I curated the archival context behind this collection." Her voice remained steady. No apology. No defensiveness. "And the artist?" the father asked. "In Lagos," she replied. "He doesn't attend auctions." The implication lingered. He paints. Others profit. The CEO felt the undercurrent immediately. She wasn't just challenging him. She was protecting something. Her name, they would later learn, was Amara Okoye, daughter of a public school teacher and a mechanic. Full academic scholarship to study art history in London. Master's degree focused on post-colonial visual narratives. Turned down a private collector's offer that would have paid off her entire family's debt in one transaction. Why? Because the collector wanted exclusivity. She believed art about resistance should not be locked behind private doors. That detail traveled in whispers through the gallery as guests quietly searched her name. Self-made, principled, difficult. The CEO listened as the curator, eager to restore balance, added, "Amara has worked with museums across 3 continents. She ensures cultural integrity is preserved." Preserved. The word struck something. His empire was built on expansion. Preservation was not a strategy he practiced often. His father stepped closer to the painting again, hands folded behind his back. "You believe it should not have been sold?" he asked her gently. "I believe," she replied, "that intent matters." "And what do you believe his intent was?" the father asked, nodding slightly toward his son. The question hung carefully. She did not rush. She studied the CEO as if evaluating more than a purchase. "I believe," she said finally, "that he buys what strengthens his position." A murmur. Accurate. Clinical. Not insulting. Just precise. The CEO's expression did not change. "Strength is not a flaw," he said calmly. "No," she agreed. "But neither is vulnerability." The word landed heavier than the last. Vulnerability. It did not belong in boardrooms. It did not belong in acquisition meetings. It certainly did not belong in front of financial press. Yet here it was, placed deliberately between them. He had dealt with defiance before. Competitors who overestimated their leverage. Politicians who misjudged influence. This felt different. She wasn't attempting to overpower him. She was refusing to shrink. There is a difference. He noticed the details now. Her posture was relaxed but grounded. Shoulders back. Chin level. No tremor in her voice. She wasn't reckless. She was composed. And that unsettled him more than anger would have. Flashback. 3 years earlier. A private investor dinner in Tokyo. A younger executive had questioned his expansion strategy publicly. Suggested risk mitigation. Expressed concern. The CEO had dismantled his argument in under 4 minutes. Numbers. Market data. Projections. The executive resigned 2 weeks later. The lesson was clear. Precision defeats doubt. But tonight, precision did not feel like the correct tool. Because she was not debating market logic. She was debating meaning. The father shifted again. "You've worked closely with the artist?" he asked. "For 2 years," she replied. "And you believe this piece reflects displacement?" "Yes." "And survival?" "Yes." The older man nodded thoughtfully. The CEO recognized that look. It was the same look his father wore when evaluating a potential acquisition target. Interest. Assessment. Possibility. He felt something tighten again. Not jealousy. Disruption. The structure of the evening had shifted away from him, and he did not like not controlling the center. Guests began circling closer now, drawn by the tension. Phones discreetly lifted. The curator attempted to redirect attention toward champagne. It failed. The CEO stepped forward slightly, closing the physical distance between himself and Amara. "If displacement is the subject," he said evenly, "then ownership becomes a form of validation. Does it not?" Her eyes sharpened. "Validation for whom?" she asked. "For the artist." "For the buyer," she corrected calmly. The father exhaled slowly, as though enjoying a chess match. "You assume ego," the CEO replied. "I assume pattern," she said. Another precise answer. She wasn't accusing. She was analyzing. And she was doing it in public. There was something else. Something subtle. She was not intimidated by his father either. Most people softened in his presence. She did not. She addressed him respectfully, but without deference, as though legacy did not impress her. That realization unsettled him further. Because if legacy did not impress her, what would? The father turned toward his son briefly. "What do you see in it?" he asked. It was a simple question, but it cut deeper than the one she had asked earlier. "What do you see?" The CEO glanced back at the painting. Thick brushstrokes. Fragments of muted gold beneath darker layers. A faint outline of something buried beneath texture. He could answer strategically. Talk about cultural diversification, global positioning, emerging market relevance. He knew the language. But under her steady gaze, those answers felt dishonest. He realized something quietly disturbing. He had not truly looked at the painting before bidding. He had assessed it, valued it, projected its future worth. But he had not seen it. And she knew. That knowledge unsettled him more than her initial accusation. Flashback. Age 9. His father standing beside him at a construction site. "You must always see beyond what others see," the older man had said. "See weakness before they do. See opportunity before they do." He had trained himself to see patterns in markets. But no one had trained him to see patterns in people, especially not in someone who refused to shrink. Back in the gallery, Amara spoke again. "You bought power tonight," she said quietly. "That's consistent." "And what would inconsistency look like?" he asked. "Listening," she replied. The word lingered. Listening implied learning. Learning implied lack. He did not lack. He executed. The father studied his son's profile carefully. Waiting. Assessing. The CEO felt the pressure build. Not from investors. Not from cameras. From within. He could dismiss her. End this publicly. Reassert dominance. But something held him in place. Curiosity. Unwelcome. Persistent. She turned slightly toward the painting again. "Tell me," she said, not aggressively but directly. "What do you see?" The question was simple, but it demanded honesty. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Numbers would not work here. Metrics would not work. He searched for something genuine. He found nothing ready. For the first time in years, he did not have a prepared answer. And she saw it. Not triumphantly, but knowingly. His father saw it too. That flicker of hesitation. Small, but real. The silence stretched again. Cameras leaned in. The CEO felt something unfamiliar. Not defeat. Exposure. He could not answer honestly without admitting he had purchased without understanding. And he would not lie. So he did neither. He held her gaze instead. And in that unspoken admission, the balance shifted. Because power had met perspective. And perspective had not bowed. She offered him a small, unreadable nod. Not victory. Recognition. He had not faked it. That mattered. To her. And unexpectedly. To him. The father stepped back slightly, allowing space between them. He did not intervene. He did not rescue. He simply observed. And the CEO understood something quietly profound. This was no longer about a painting. It was about identity. About what he had inherited. And what he had never questioned. He inhaled slowly. The gallery air felt heavier now. Full of something unscripted. Unmanaged. And deeply unsettling. She did not look impressed. She did not look intimidated. She looked certain. And for the first time in years, He didn't like how that felt. The gallery eventually resumed its hum. Champagne refilled. Investors recalibrated their smiles. The curator redirected attention to other installations. But something had shifted in the room, subtle and irreversible. The CEO did not leave immediately. Neither did she. Amara stood near the far wall now, speaking with a small group of graduate students who had attended the exhibit. Her tone had softened, but her posture had not. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, her words were deliberate. He watched from a distance. Not openly. Measured. He told himself it was assessment, risk evaluation, reputation management. But none of those explanations felt accurate. His father approached quietly. "You're still here," the older man observed. "So are you," the CEO replied. A faint smile ghosted across his father's face. "I enjoy conversations that disrupt certainty." The CEO did not answer. He knew what that meant. It was Amara who closed the distance next. Not dramatically, not nervously, simply walking toward him once the students dispersed. "There's a cafe across the street," she said. "If you'd like to understand the piece rather than defend it." It wasn't flirtation. It was invitation. He hesitated for exactly 1 second, long enough to recognize that this was not on his calendar. Then he nodded. His father watched them leave without comment. The cafe was small. Warm lighting. No photographers. No curators. No investors. Just wood tables and quiet conversation. The CEO removed his coat carefully, placed it over the chair. Every movement still precise. Amara ordered tea. He ordered black coffee. Silence settled briefly between them. Not awkward. Measured. "You could have dismissed me," she said finally. "Yes. Why didn't you?" He considered the question. "Because you weren't wrong," he answered. The admission was quiet. Controlled. But real. Her eyes shifted slightly. Not softened. Adjusted. "Most men in your position would have protected their pride," she said. "Most men in my position don't get challenged publicly," he replied. "And yet you stayed." "I don't retreat from tension." A pause. "That's not the same as confronting it," she said calmly. There it was again. Not accusation. Observation. She stirred her tea slowly. "You build companies," she continued. "I study cultural memory. On the surface, they seem unrelated." "They're not," he replied. "Explain." "Companies survive by adapting to threat, by identifying competitors early, by restructuring when necessary." She nodded once. "Art survives the same way." He studied her. "Go on." "Colonization tried to erase identity," she said. "Language, visual expression, story. But art adapted. It hid meaning in patterns, in rhythm, in abstraction. It survived by refusing to be simplified." He leaned back slightly. "And you believe business lacks that complexity?" "I believe business often simplifies complexity into profit," she replied. "And you believe that's wrong?" "I believe it's incomplete." Her answers never rose in volume. They didn't need to. Flashback. Age 17. His father walking him through the factory floor. "You must be willing to cut what slows growth," the older man had said. "Sentiment is expensive." He had nodded. Efficiency over emotion. Expansion over reflection. Now, sitting across from a woman who studied survival through art rather than markets, he felt the friction of two worldviews pressing against each other. "You talk about survival," he said. "So do I. The difference is scale." "Scale doesn't change intent," she replied. He leaned forward slightly. "And what do you believe my intent is?" She held his gaze. "You were taught that control equals safety." The sentence landed precisely. Not cruel. Accurate. He did not respond immediately. She continued. "Art born from displacement isn't about control. It's about reclamation. Identity that refuses to be purchased." "You think I purchase identity," he said. "I think you've inherited one." That struck deeper than he expected. The cafe door opened softly. His father stepped inside. Unannounced. Unhurried. He approached their table with measured curiosity. "I wondered where the evening had taken you," he said. The CEO did not show surprise. His father rarely acted without intention. Amara greeted him respectfully, not deferentially. "You've built something extraordinary," she said to the father. He inclined his head. "And yet you believe we misunderstand what we acquire." "I believe power sometimes forgets what it touches," she replied. The father studied her more carefully now. "And what would you have my son remember?" he asked. She did not hesitate. "That he has a choice." Silence. The father leaned back slightly. "Choice," he repeated thoughtfully. is often a luxury. Only when it's been surrendered for too long, she replied. The CEO felt something tighten again. Not irritation this time. Awareness. This conversation was no longer theoretical. It was personal. The father shifted his gaze to his son. You've always valued discipline, he said calmly. But discipline without reflection becomes rigidity. The CEO met his father's eyes. This was not a reprimand. It was an observation, directed at both of them. The father stood. I'll leave you to your discussion, he said. Then, turning to Amara, he added quietly, continue to challenge him. And he left. The cafe door closed. The air felt different, lighter, and heavier. They sat in silence for a moment. You enjoy this, the CEO said finally. Enjoy what? Disrupting structure. She smiled faintly. I enjoy watching people question the structures they've never examined. And you believe I've never examined mine? I believe you were rewarded too consistently to need to. The truth of it irritated him and intrigued him. He had been efficient, successful, disciplined. No one had asked him what he wanted. They had asked what he would achieve. There is a difference. The emotional shift was subtle. Irritation softened into curiosity. Curiosity sharpened into respect. Not romantic. Not yet. But undeniable. You speak as though inheritance is a burden, he said. It can be, she replied. Especially when it replaces identity. And what is identity to you? Choice, she said simply. He absorbed that. Choice. He had chosen acquisitions. Chosen expansion strategies. Chosen efficiency. But had he chosen himself? Or simply executed expectation? Outside, the city lights reflected off glass buildings. Inside, two worldviews aligned briefly, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. You think I can step outside what I've built? He asked. I think you can decide what it becomes, she replied. That difference mattered. She wasn't asking him to dismantle legacy. She was asking him to define it. He exhaled slowly. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, she said. It's uncomfortable. He almost smiled. I don't avoid discomfort. No, she agreed. You avoid uncertainty. That lingered. Because uncertainty cannot be controlled. And control had defined him. Later that night, as they stepped outside the cafe, the air colder now, there was no dramatic pause. No lingering touch. Just acknowledgement. This conversation isn't finished, she said. It rarely is, he replied. She nodded once and walked away. He watched her go. Not possessively. Thoughtfully. Back in the car, silence filled the space between him and his father. After a long moment, the older man spoke. She sees you. The CEO kept his gaze forward. Everyone sees me, he replied. No, his father said quietly. They see what you represent. A pause. She sees what you hide. That sentence settled deeper than any boardroom critique ever had. Because it implied there was something hidden. Something even he had not examined fully. The car continued moving through the city. Lights streaked past the window. She sees you. The words echoed. Not as accusation. Not as warning. As recognition. And that unsettled him more than confrontation ever could. Because seeing someone is not the same as choosing them. And for the first time in years, he was no longer certain which path had been chosen for him. But seeing him and choosing him were two different things. Momentum has a way of exposing what conversations try to soften. For a few days after the cafe, the world felt contained, controlled, quiet. He returned to the 42nd floor, to glass walls and calibrated lighting, to projections and international calls. But something had shifted inside him. He noticed details now, how quickly executives deferred, how often people agreed before fully listening, how frequently his father watched him when discussions turned personal. And he noticed something else. His calendar for the following week had been updated. Private dinner, joint press briefing, strategic alignment announcement. With the Kim family. No discussion, just scheduling. The board meeting that morning was sharper than usual. The merger needs stability, one director said carefully. The markets are volatile. We need a unified narrative. Another added, investors are watching your public movements more closely after the recent acquisitions. He understood the language. Stability meant predictability. Predictability meant marriage. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even personal. It was structural. His father sat at the end of the table, silent until the room quieted. The engagement announcement will proceed, the chairman said calmly. We will host a joint conference next month. The CEO felt the words settle. Proceed. Not discuss. Not consider. Proceed. He did not object. He did not agree. He remained still, and that stillness was interpreted as compliance. Meanwhile, across the city, a headline began circulating. Han Seong airs Valentine's gallery clash with mystery woman. Photos accompanied it. One of her standing firmly before him. One of them leaving the gallery together. Another entering the cafe. Angles suggested intimacy. Narrative implied scandal. She saw it on her phone while reviewing archival material for another exhibit. Her name wasn't printed, but her image was unmistakable. She read the comments. Speculation. Assumptions. Mockery. She's bold. She's naive. Probably planned it. Her jaw tightened. She didn't mind criticism. She minded distortion. And nowhere in the article was there mention of the engagement announcement quietly being prepared behind the scenes. The CEO learned of the article in the elevator. His assistant hesitated before speaking. "Sir, there's been coverage." He scanned the headline. His expression did not change. "Control the narrative," he said calmly. No statements. But control felt thinner than usual. Because this wasn't a hostile takeover. It was personal optics. And optics were unpredictable. She didn't call him. She didn't text. She walked into Han Seong Global's headquarters unannounced. The receptionist stiffened. The executive floor assistant hesitated. But her name now carried quiet recognition. She was escorted upstairs. He was reviewing financial projections when the door opened. He looked up, not surprised, but alert. She did not sit. "You're engaged," she said evenly. It wasn't a question. He closed the folder slowly. "It hasn't been announced. But it will be." "Yes." The space between them thickened. "And you didn't think to mention that," she continued. His response came measured. It was irrelevant to our conversation. A slight shift in her expression. "Was it?" "Our discussion was about art," he replied. "No," she corrected calmly. "It was about identity." Silence. He stood. "You think I owe you disclosure?" he asked. "I think honesty changes context," she said. He felt irritation flicker. Not because she was emotional. Because she was precise. The hesitation that followed was subtle, almost invisible. But she caught it. "You don't know what you're choosing," she said quietly. "I know exactly what I'm choosing," he replied. "Do you?" The question lingered. And for the first time since she entered. He hesitated. Just a fraction. Long enough. She saw it. That pause. That uncertainty. Trust shifts in moments like that. Not through shouting. Through silence. "You don't have to defend legacy to me," she said. "But don't pretend you're free." His jaw tightened. "This isn't about freedom." "No," she said softly. "It's about safety." The word landed cleanly. She stepped back slightly. "I won't be someone's rebellion," she said. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just firmly. He held her gaze. "You assume that's what this is. You assume it's not." Another pause. He could have clarified. Could have said the engagement was strategic. Arranged. Unchosen. But explaining would expose internal fracture. And fracture weakens position. He chose restraint. And restraint felt like distance. She nodded once. "That's what I thought." She turned toward the door. He almost spoke. Almost. But almost is not action. The door closed softly behind her. And something fragile closed with it. Later that evening, investors called. The board requested reassurance. Personal matters must not destabilize corporate direction, one director warned. His father called him into his private office. "You look distracted," the older man observed. "I'm not." A quiet beat. "The article is noise," his father continued. "The engagement will neutralize it." Neutralize. The language of conflict. "Is that what this is?" the CEO asked. "A phase," his father replied. Curiosity mistaken for depth. He did not respond. Because for the first time, he wasn't certain that was true. Across the city, Amara deleted the article from her phone. Not because it hurt, but because it clarified. She had worked too hard to become someone's subplot. Too hard to build her voice, her credibility, her scholarship. She would not be reduced to scandal. Especially not in a narrative she didn't consent to. She replayed their conversation in her mind. The hesitation. Small, but revealing. She did not need declarations. She needed decisiveness. And he had offered neither. Back in his apartment overlooking the river, the CEO stood alone. City lights reflected across the glass. He thought about the cafe. About her words. Choice. Identity. Control. He thought about the merger announcement draft waiting in his inbox. He thought about the gallery. The way she had refused to be impressed. He told himself this was strategic. Necessary. Predictable. But something about her walking out without anger unsettled him more than confrontation would have. She had not accused. She had simply stepped away. And stepping away creates absence. Absence creates reflection. His phone buzzed. A draft press release appeared on screen. Halcyon Global announces strategic union between leading families. Strategic union. Stability. Growth. Legacy. The language felt hollow tonight. For the first time, the structure he had lived inside did not feel solid. It felt inherited. He stared at the screen longer than usual. And for the first time, he wasn't sure who he was protecting. The announcement went live at 9 a.m. Precise. Polished. Inevitable. Halcyon Global announces strategic union between leading families. Photos accompanied it. A staged image from a previous formal dinner. Neutral smiles. Balanced posture. Two dynasties aligned. Markets reacted within minutes. Stock rose slightly at first. Stability reassures investors. But then the other articles resurfaced. Valentine's Day. Gallery confrontation. Mystery woman. Cafe images. Narratives collided. Commentators questioned timing. Speculated about internal conflict. Suggested distraction. By midday, the stock dipped. Not catastrophically, but noticeably. In boardrooms, small dips signal larger fears. The emergency meeting was called before sunset. Directors sat straighter than usual. Voices sharper. This is unnecessary volatility, one said. We cannot afford reputational confusion during a merger, said another. You must demonstrate singular commitment, a third added. Singular commitment. Not divided attention. Not philosophical reflection. The CEO listened without interruption. He did not defend himself. He did not reference Amara. He did not explain hesitation. He spoke only once. The company remains stable. A director leaned forward. The company is not the concern. Your focus is. Silence followed. Across the table, his father's expression remained unreadable, but tension gathered in his posture. The media cycle intensified. Talk shows debated authenticity versus obligation. Financial analysts questioned whether personal distraction would impact future acquisitions. Amara's image circulated again, this time framed as a complication, a disruption, a risk. She watched none of it, but she felt it. Museum sponsors withdrew invitations. A foundation board asked whether she had anticipated reputational entanglement. She responded calmly. She did not apologize, but she stepped back from public appearances. Not out of shame, out of clarity. She would not be positioned as instability in someone else's narrative. You want to see her? Not at the gallery, not at a public venue, at a quiet park near the university where she occasionally lectured. The sky was gray, wind low. She stood near a sculpture installation, hands tucked into her coat. You shouldn't be here, she said without turning. I'm aware. She faced him slowly. No anger, just distance. I didn't ask you to choose me, she said. I know. You didn't ask me to wait either. He didn't respond immediately, because both statements were true. You think I'm weak, he said finally. I think you're divided, she replied. That's temporary. Is it? The question lingered. He stepped closer, but not too close. This merger stabilizes thousands of employees, he said. Families. Expansion plans. Years of work. And where do you fit into it? She asked quietly. I am the company. No, she said. You lead it. The distinction mattered. He looked away briefly. The wind shifted. Leaves scraped softly against pavement. I won't be positioned as a moral test, she continued, or as the dramatic chapter before your wedding. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He hesitated. Again, not because he lacked feeling, because he lacked certainty. And uncertainty makes language fragile. Her expression changed slightly. Not hurt. Resolved. That's what I thought, she said. He exhaled slowly. I don't want you to disappear, he said. I'm not disappearing, she replied. I'm stepping back. For how long? For as long as you need to decide who you are. It was not ultimatum. It was boundary. He could have fought it. Insisted. Promised. But promises without clarity become manipulation. So he did something uncharacteristic. He let her go. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Quietly. She nodded once and walked away. This time, he did not follow. The silence afterward was louder than conflict. He returned to his office. Work resumed. Deals closed. Meetings continued. But something in his focus fractured. He caught himself rereading emails. Pausing mid-sentence during calls. His father noticed. Of course he did. 2 days later, The chairman summoned him. The office felt colder than usual. "You've been obedient your whole life," his father said without preamble. The sentence carried weight. Why start thinking now? It was not shouted, but it struck harder than raised voices. "I've always thought," the CEO replied evenly. "You've always executed," his father corrected. Silence. "You understand what's at stake," the older man continued. "This merger secures long-term dominance. It prevents hostile pressure. It strengthens generational continuity. And at what cost?" the CEO asked before he could stop himself. The question lingered in the air. His father's gaze sharpened. "Cost is relative." "Is it?" The older man stood slowly. "I built this empire from nothing," he said quietly. "There were no choices. Only survival." "And now?" the CEO asked. "Now you ensure it survives beyond you." The generational weight pressed down. Legacy was not romance. It was obligation. "You've been disciplined," his father continued. "Reliable. Strategic. Don't let distraction redefine you." Distraction. The word stung, because it reduced complexity into inconvenience. He did not argue further. He left the office without resolution. The board's pressure intensified. Subtle threats surfaced. "If instability continues, we may need to reassess leadership optics." Optics, not performance. Optics. The message was clear. Personal ambiguity weakens authority. He doubled down on work. Longer hours. Sharper decisions. Faster responses. If he could not resolve internal conflict, he would at least eliminate external doubt. But the more he worked, the more absence grew. Absence of her voice. Absence of challenge. Absence of being seen beyond projection. Silence creates space. Space invites reflection. He did not like what reflection revealed. Days passed. No calls from her. No messages. No confrontation. Just distance. The engagement planning moved forward. Invitations drafted. Press strategy refined. The stock stabilized slowly. Externally, order returned. Internally, fracture deepened. Then, 3 nights later, during a late strategy session, his phone buzzed. Not from the board. Not from media. From home. His assistant's voice trembled slightly. "Sir, your father collapsed." The world does not pause for emotional processing, but it tilts. He stood abruptly, chair scraping sharply against polished floor. "What happened?" "Cardiac episode. He's being transported now." The room around him blurred briefly. Directors spoke. Assistants moved. He heard none of it clearly. Only one sentence echoed. "You've been obedient your whole life. Why start thinking now?" He left the building without ceremony, without press, without posture, just urgency. Because in moments like this, legacy is not strategic. It is fragile. And as the car sped toward the hospital, the weight of inheritance felt less like structure and more like something breakable. The silence of the past few days closed in around him. And for the first time since he was old enough to understand expectation, he was afraid. Not of markets, not of scandal, of loss. And he did not yet know whether he was racing toward an ending or the beginning of something he could no longer control. Hospitals strip away illusion. Glass towers become irrelevant. Stock prices lose meaning. Titles dissolve into waiting. The private wing was quiet. No reporters had been alerted. No board members were present. No assistants hovered with updates. Just muted lighting. The steady rhythm of machines. And the quiet fragility of a man who had once seemed indestructible. The CEO stood outside the room for several seconds before entering. Not out of fear. Out of recalibration. He had never seen his father horizontal. Never seen him small against white sheets. The machines beeped steadily. His father's eyes were closed, but not peacefully. There was tension even in rest. Discipline does not disappear simply because the body falters. A nurse nodded gently and left. Silence returned. He stepped closer. For a moment, he simply watched. The lines in his father's face seemed deeper here. Less composed. Less deliberate. The older man opened his eyes slowly. Recognition came immediately. "You're here," he said, voice weaker but steady. "Yes." A pause. "You left the meeting?" "Yes." The faintest hint of approval flickered. Even now, he pulled a chair beside the bed and sat. No suit jacket. No phone in hand. No posture designed for authority. Just a son. The silence between them felt heavier than any boardroom confrontation. "I suppose," his father began quietly, "this is inconvenient timing." The CEO almost smiled. You chose the worst week possible, he replied. A faint breath that might have been a laugh. Then quiet again. The machines continued their rhythm. Life reduced to sound and breath. After a long moment, his father spoke. I built this empire because I was afraid you'd have nothing. The sentence arrived without warning. No preface. No strategy. Just truth. The CEO looked at him carefully. You never lacked anything. The older man continued. Because I lacked everything once. He stared at the ceiling as he spoke. When I was your age, survival was not abstract. It was immediate. One mistake could collapse everything. The CEO listened without interruption. I told myself, his father went on, that if I could build something strong enough, structured enough, disciplined enough, you would never feel that fear. A pause. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking whether you needed it. The words settled slowly. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Heavy. You trained me to lead, the CEO said quietly. I trained you to endure, his father corrected. Silence. I never asked what you wanted, the older man admitted. Because wanting felt dangerous. The admission shifted something fundamental. For years, obedience had felt like respect. Now it felt like inheritance of fear. He leaned forward slightly. You think I don't value what you built? He asked. I know you do. Then why does this feel like rebellion? His father closed his eyes briefly. Because you're thinking beyond it. Another long pause. The machines continued. I mistook your discipline for certainty, his father said. I thought if you never questioned me, it meant you agreed. The CEO exhaled slowly. I didn't know I could question you. The honesty surprised even him. The room felt smaller suddenly. More intimate. You can, his father said quietly. The simplicity of it unsettled him. All this time, he had believed legacy was fixed. Pre-written. Non-negotiable. Now the architect of that structure was admitting uncertainty. He stared at his hands. I don't know what I want, he admitted. The words were unfamiliar. He did not admit not knowing. Ever. But I know what I don't want, he continued. And what is that? His father asked. I don't want to live a life that feels pre-approved. The air shifted. Not in tension. In recognition. His father studied him carefully. You think marriage will trap you. I think marriage should not be strategy. The older man nodded faintly. Do you care for her? The question was direct. He did not pretend confusion. Yes. It was the first time he said it aloud. Not to the board. Not to himself. To his father. And does she care for you? Yes. Then why hesitate? Because hesitation had been built into him. Because safety had always outranked desire. Because choice had never been framed as responsibility. He did not answer immediately. His father watched him struggle. And for once, he did not correct him. You've been obedient your whole life, the older man said quietly. The echo of their previous conversation. But obedience is not identity. The CEO met his father's gaze. Then what is? Decision, his father replied. Ownership of consequence. A breath. If you cancel this merger, his father continued, there will be fallout. I know. Board resistance. I know. Financial instability. I know. And perhaps resentment. That lingered. You would resent me? The CEO asked. The older man's expression softened slightly. I would struggle, he admitted. But I would survive. The words carried weight. Permission disguised as warning. For the first time in his life, the path in front of him was not singular. It forked, and neither direction was safe. They sat in silence again. The hospital room held no shareholders. No cameras. No narrative. Just two men confronting inherited fear. I was afraid you would have nothing, his father repeated softly. And I was afraid of disappointing you, the CEO replied. That truth sat between them. Raw. Unfiltered. Not strategic. The machines beeped steadily. Life continuing. Fragile but persistent. His father closed his eyes briefly. Then perhaps, he said quietly, we were both wrong. The CEO felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief. Clarity. He stood slowly. His father looked at him again. You will decide, the older man said. Not because of her. Not because of me. Because of you. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily. Choice is heavier than obedience. He nodded once. Not dramatically. Just decisively. Outside the room, the hallway felt colder. Quieter. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Board updates. Market projections. Engagement logistics. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he opened the draft press release. Strategic union between leading families. He read it carefully. Every word felt engineered. He closed the file, opened a new message. Short, direct. The merger announcement is canceled effective immediately. All related press activity is suspended. He paused only once, then sent it. The message disappeared into servers and inboxes. There was no applause, no music, no visible shift in the skyline. Just action and consequence approaching. He stood in the hospital corridor alone for a moment longer, breathing steadily, the path ahead uncertain, but chosen. And the next morning, the world reacted. The reaction was immediate. By 8:12 a.m., financial networks were running breaking banners. Halcyon Global cancels strategic merger. By 8:30, analysts were debating whether the decision signaled instability. By 9 o'clock, the stock began to swing. Not collapse. Swing. Up 3% on speculation of independence. Down 5% on uncertainty. Up again on acquisition rumors. Down again when a board member anonymously questioned executive impulsivity. Markets do not like unpredictability, and he had just introduced it. The board convened within hours. This time, the tone was not cautious. It was sharp. "You acted without consensus," one director said bluntly. "I acted within my authority," he replied evenly. "Authority does not equal wisdom, nor does consensus equal courage," he responded. Silence followed. Another director leaned forward. "This company is not a philosophical experiment." "No," he said calmly. "It's an evolving institution." Murmurs. The word evolving unsettled them. Because evolution implies change. Change implies risk. Media commentary escalated. Some praised him. A rare display of independence from a corporate heir. Others criticized him. Emotional decision-making disguised as strategy. The gallery photos resurfaced again, now framed as motive. Was it love? Was it rebellion? Was it ego? No one knew. Speculation filled the vacuum. He did not grant interviews. He did not defend himself publicly. Instead, he called for a press conference. Not to explain the cancellation, to announce something else. The room was packed. Cameras angled carefully. Reporters ready with pointed questions. He stood at the podium alone. No engagement partner. No strategic ally. Just him. Halcyon Global, he began, voice steady, has spent decades expanding infrastructure, logistics, and technology across borders. He paused. But expansion without cultural responsibility is incomplete. Reporters shifted. This was not the apology they expected. "We are establishing a new division," he continued, "focused on cultural investment and preservation. Independent artists, historians, and institutions that protect identity in a globalized economy." Silence. Then questions exploded. Is this related to the gallery incident? Is this a reputational pivot? Are you conceding weakness? He answered none of those directly. "This is long overdue," he said calmly. "Profit and preservation are not opposites." Across the city, Amara watched the broadcast from her apartment. Arms folded, expression unreadable. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply observed. Inside the boardroom later that afternoon, frustration sharpened. "You are diluting focus," a director warned. "I am diversifying resilience," he replied. "This is sentimental. It is strategic. You canceled a merger and replaced it with art funding." "I replaced dependency with autonomy," he corrected. The room bristled. One director spoke what others were thinking. "Some are questioning your stability." He met the accusation evenly. "Then they misunderstand resolve." The stock fluctuated violently for 3 days. Analysts split into camps. Some called it visionary, others reckless. Employees whispered in hallways. Is he losing control? Is he redefining it? Uncertainty unsettles institutions. But clarity, when sustained, reshapes them. Then something unexpected happened. The chairman called his own press conference. Unscheduled. Brief. He stood beside his son for the first time since the cancellation. Cameras flashed relentlessly. The older man spoke calmly. "My son made a decision," he said. "Not out of impulse. Out of conviction." The words were deliberate, measured, supportive. "Halcyon Global was built to survive change," he continued. "It will continue to do so." Reporters attempted to probe for division. "Do you agree with canceling the merger?" "I support leadership," he replied. That single sentence stabilized more than stock charts ever could. Markets respond to unity, even reluctant unity. The volatility slowed, not eliminated, stabilized. Later that evening, alone in his office, the CEO replayed the broadcast. Not for ego. For evaluation. His father's voice carried something unfamiliar. Pride. Not the pride of compliance. The pride of independence. It felt different. He leaned back in his chair slowly. For years, his identity had been defined by alignment. Now it was being tested by divergence. He thought about the cultural division announcement, about artists and historians receiving funding, about institutions long ignored by corporate structures. He did not pretend this was altruism. It was alignment of values he had only recently allowed himself to examine. Choice, not obedience. But choice carries scrutiny. Outside, headlines continued. Air risks empire for personal beliefs. Strategic genius or emotional recklessness. He ignored them. Instead, he drafted internal restructuring plans. Transparent budgets. Clear accountability. If he was going to shift direction, it would not be symbolic. It would be operational. That was how he understood transformation. Not as declaration, as execution. Across town, Amara received an email from Halcyon Global's new cultural division. A formal invitation. Consulting position. Autonomous oversight. Full authority over artistic integrity. She stared at the screen for a long moment. This was not a gesture. It was infrastructure. But infrastructure built by someone still learning himself. She did not reply immediately. Because public decisions are easier than private ones. Days passed. The market stabilized cautiously. Board resistance softened into wary observation. The engagement narrative faded from headlines, replaced by speculation about long-term impact. Then, quietly, calendars turned. The dates circled in red on media planners' schedules approached again. Valentine's Day, 1 year since the gallery. Reporters began drafting anniversary pieces. Will he return? Will she appear? Was it a moment or a turning point? The city prepared for spectacle. But inside the quiet of his office and the quiet of her apartment, anticipation was not about headlines. It was about unfinished conversation. Valentine's Day approached again. 1 year later, the gallery doors opened again. Same white walls, same polished floors, same soft lighting that turned conversation into something intimate. But the headline above the entrance was different. Reclaimed Narratives, curated by Amara Okoye. The line stretched across the wall in quiet confidence. Inside, the crowd gathered early. Scholars, artists, students, investors who now spoke cautiously about cultural equity as though they had always believed in it. The air felt expectant, not scandal-driven. Earned. Amara stood near the center installation, speaking to a small circle of attendees. Her voice was calm, grounded, deliberate. She wore no dramatic colors, no performative glamour, just presence. The exhibition featured artists from communities often overlooked by international markets. Stories of displacement, resistance, survival. This time, the narrative was not curated for profit. It was curated for reclamation. Across the street, a black car stopped quietly. No press release had announced his attendance. No photographers had been tipped. The door opened. He stepped out alone. No entourage, no assistant, no posture designed to command attention. His father followed a moment later, slower than last year, stronger than the hospital room. They did not speak as they crossed the street. They did not need to. Inside the gallery, conversations softened as recognition spread. Heads turned. Whispers traveled. But he did not move toward the center immediately. He paused near the entrance, looked around, not assessing value, observing meaning. The paintings were bold, textured, complex. They did not ask to be owned. They asked to be understood. His father stood beside him, hands folded loosely. No instruction, no correction, just quiet companionship. Then she saw him. No dramatic pause, no music rising, just breath. A small shift in her shoulders as their eyes met across the room. She excused herself from the group politely, walked toward him, not hurried, not hesitant. Steady. You came, she said. Yes. A beat passed. The room continued moving around them, but the noise felt distant. I wasn't sure you would, she admitted. I wasn't sure either, he replied honestly. Her gaze searched his face briefly. For hesitation. For uncertainty. She found neither. Your division, she said carefully. It's funding 3 independent museums this year. Yes. And you didn't brand it after yourself. No. A flicker of something softer moved through her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. His father stepped slightly to the side, giving them space. Still present. Not directing. I read your statement, she continued. About preservation. I meant it. I know. That mattered. More than public speculation. More than stock recovery. Knowing. He glanced around the gallery again. These artists, he said, they're not protected by market leverage. No, she replied. They're protected by integrity. He nodded once. I'm still learning that language. She almost smiled. Language takes time. Silence settled between them again. Not uncomfortable. Grounded. There was no urgency now. No rebellion. No performance. Just two people standing in a space that had once exposed fracture. I created something, he said quietly. Her expression sharpened slightly. A foundation, he continued. Independent from Hanseon's operational control. Funded through my personal equity. She didn't interrupt. It supports underrepresented artists and historians, he said. Long-term grants. No acquisition clauses. She held his gaze carefully. It carries your name? She asked. He shook his head. It carries yours. The words did not land loudly. They settled. Heavy. Considered. She inhaled slowly. That's not necessary. It isn't symbolic, he replied. It's structural. A beat. Learned how to choose, he added quietly. There it was. Not a declaration of love. Not an apology. A statement of growth. Choice. Not obedience. Not reaction. Choice. Her eyes softened slightly. Not because he had given her something. Because he had become something. Around them, the exhibition continued. Guests admired installations. Conversations layered over soft ambient music. But the intensity that once defined their interaction was gone. Replaced by steadiness. His father approached slowly. He looked at Amara, then at his son. This is stronger work, the older man said, gesturing toward the gallery. She nodded respectfully. Thank you. The father turned to his son. You see it now. It wasn't a question. No, the CEO replied quietly. I'm seeing it. The distinction mattered. His father's eyes held his for a long moment. Then he stepped back again, not withdrawing, releasing. The symbolic weight of that movement did not go unnoticed. Not by either of them. They walked through the gallery together. Not arm in arm. Not staged. Side by side. She explained a piece about fragmented borders and inherited silence. He listened, not to respond, to understand. He asked questions, not to test, to learn. Occasionally, their hands brushed lightly as they moved between installations. No dramatic reaction, just awareness. His father trailed a few steps behind, watching, not evaluating, not controlling, just observing a different kind of inheritance unfold. Near the final piece, they paused. The painting depicted layered textures of gold and charcoal. Survival embedded beneath surface brilliance. He recognized the visual language now, not as asset, as testimony. You were right, he said quietly. About what? Cost. She studied him briefly. Understanding always costs something, she said. I know. The room felt warmer than last year. Not because tension was absent, but because it had transformed. They stood together in front of the final installation as guests slowly circled around them. No spectacle. No headlines. Just presence. He did not need applause this time. He did not need validation. He had already made his decision. And as they walked toward the exit together, his father lingering near the center of the room, watching not with control, but with quiet acceptance, it became clear that something fundamental had shifted. Not empire. Not legacy. Him. And this time, it wasn't legacy that decided his future.